have been an educator for a number of years. I still have quite a soft voice. So whenever the classroom is in complete disarray, I have to call someone else in to be like, okay, everyone, quiet, quiet. So please, if you can't hear me, just raise your hand. I first want to start by acknowledging just how excited I am to share the stage with a young innovator and change maker. Let's please give another hand of applause. Really, truly, you inspire me. This is why I do the work that I do. Who am I? My name is Deanna. I am a social entrepreneur, learning designer, facilitator, and educator. And there is one question that keeps me up at night and that has given me wrinkles and white hair. And it is the following. How might we enable young people to become entrepreneurial, digitally empowered, workforce ready, and civically engaged individuals? It is asking a lot of educators everywhere, and of society, and government, and policies. So just out of curiosity, because as a designer, I like to validate my assumptions, who here in the room is actively also pondering this question, just by a raise of hands? Okay, that's less than 50% of the audience. Hans, we should have a chat. Now, this question really is the underpinning of the work that I do with my colleagues at UpstartED. When we launched the organization back in 2016, we were really fascinated with the idea that equity is important, that all young people deserve a chance to become change makers. So how can we enable all youth to thrive in an uncertain future? Today, I'm going to tell you the story of UpstartED because I believe that it is in sharing this narrative that you might also find insights that can help you in your path of empowering young change makers. And the way I will do that is by sharing with you our journey to a whole child approach and how we shifted from a sole focus on technology and entrepreneurship to embracing SEL in a holistic way. I will talk about our shift to co-design, because we've always been human-centered designers, but co-design has been a radical shift in our mindset and in the way we build our programs and in the kind of impact that we have today. And finally, I will share with you really the pinnacle of our work, which is the Changemaker framework, which is an evidence-based approach to allowing us to build our change makers in a Canadian context. So allow me to transport you back to 2016. You can see I'm there on the screen. To the great chagrin of my mother, I'm sticking my tongue out, so please ignore that. But this was our team 7 years ago. We were 23 years old and under, so young change makers in our own right. And none of us at the time were seeking to be social entrepreneurs, change makers. We just wanted to serve our communities. And this was our very first event called Montreal Upstarts. Now, this is the event that started it all, our journey into social entrepreneurship. And at the time, all of us were working in the technology sector. We were engineers, salespeople, customer success managers, product developers. We were coming from very diverse backgrounds, but in the same industry. And in fact, I myself was working at IBM after having spent 2 years in the education technology industry. However, what's fascinating is that I graduated with a degree in history and political science. So I do want to let that land because my parents would also agree, is that really the kind of degree you want to pursue to have a stable career? Luckily for me, it was really, we had a tech boom in Montreal, in Canada in 2016. And in fact, the opportunities have just multiplied ever since. In fact, exponentially increased. Now Montreal has become the AI hub, one of the AI hubs in the world in terms of technology development and talent development. So because of these market dynamics, we thought to ourselves, well, technology has to be a core pillar of our curriculum. And I see many nodding heads around the room. This remains true today. Another pillar of ours was social entrepreneurship. Again, being young and excited and thrilled about all the things happening in our ecosystem, we realized that Montreal had this very small but strong network of people who are leveraging technology to affect social change. And because some of us had wanted to work for the UN or in global development, we thought, well, this is a fast track to affecting change. The years that followed for us really were kind of the golden years of the first phase of the organization. And I want to acknowledge these events because I know that many people in this room are actively engaging in them within their schools and communities. And we did the same. We ran entrepreneurship boot camps. This was the first emerging technology conference in Montreal, in Quebec, our province, back in 2017. It was unprecedented, and we brought 200 young people together to tackle challenges. Over the next few years, I really came into my own as a learning designer because, as you all heard, I didn't necessarily have a traditional background in education. And we built boot camps and accelerators. And by the end of 2019, we were building programs that were ready to scale across the country with partners such as Shopify, SAP, Blue Cross, and Google. We really believed then, as we do now, in education and industry collaboration. And we saw all the fascinating and exciting things happening in technology, and we asked ourselves, how can we be that bridge to schools, to education? But all good things must come to an end, and they did. What happened at this point in time? COVID, right. How many people in this room felt like that was a hard transition? Pre-COVID to post-COVID, yeah. We felt the same, honestly. We felt like a rug had been swept out from under our feet. And keep in mind, we were still very early on in our careers. We didn't have financial security, a large network, so our work crumbled seemingly overnight. And while most schools and nonprofits migrated their programs to some sort of technology platform to ensure the program continuity and scale, we decided to pause because we didn't know if technology applied to our current programs made sense. Did we in fact have the right solution? And that is a very designerly kind of question, right? We were so caught up in our own excitement and in what we were hearing from the teachers and students in our immediate networks that we didn't realize one key thing. We were in fact not serving the young people we set out to serve. Over 80% of our students came from backgrounds of academic advancement, or they were already demonstrating skills and interest in entrepreneurship and technology. And in fact, the students that we wanted in the room, who maybe were hesitant about their change-making or designer potential, weren't even walking through our doors. So how could we even convince them if they weren't in the room? And we had to face a very, very hard question. What had we overlooked? I myself, as a learning designer, and back then design thinking practitioner, I was honestly quite intimidated by that revelation, and humbled, deeply humbled. And I said to myself, well, if design thinking the way I am doing it is not enough, how do I move forward? Where can the solutions come from? My hypothesis at the time, by the way, was that these young people aren't showing up due to 3 factors. Awareness, maybe they just didn't know. Access, perhaps the students we wanted to serve weren't necessarily able to access the public transportation to make it to our events, or maybe they didn't have the parents who are capable and available to drive them, right, to our boot camps. Or perhaps it was about accessibility. And so I did a deep dive in universal design for learning. We looked into developing bilingual programs. And this got us part of the way, but not the whole way. I'm curious to know how many people in this room, when I talk about equity deserving, does this terminology resonate with you all, just by a show of hands? This is a terminology that we use quite frequently in North America. We are talking about historically disadvantaged and underrepresented groups. So these might be students from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, that have typically not had access to services due to limiting factors. These might be students who learn differently. We made a commitment. We said, if UpstartED dies within 3 to 6 months because we had no more investment from our funding partners, what will our legacy be? If this ended tomorrow, what would our legacy be? And we said we wanted to commit to this group of individuals. Not saying we were excluding everyone else, but what I've come to learn, as a designer, is that when you are designing for edge cases, you are informing that design for everyone else, and it benefits everyone equally. This was the big aha moment, and I think this is really one of the key things I want to pass on to you today, and it was mentioned by Miss Lee right prior to me being on stage. Excuse me. The radical shift for us was moving from consultation to co-design. Design thinking comes in many different shapes and forms, but the best designs are, in fact, co-designed. So let me tell you a bit about the distinction, the way I understand it and the way we live it. Prior to the pandemic, for the first 3 years, we were doing design thinking, human-centered design. We were listening to opinions and perspectives. We were doing the field research and taking ideas and concerns into account. But we did have quite a linear approach in terms of program development. And that brought us to the realizations around the pandemic that we had the wrong solution. Co-design is all about acknowledging that lived experience is expertise. And something that a dear mentor of mine said is that the elders in our society are the real PhDs. And that has truly stayed with me, because it has made me realize, especially in a North American context where we value certain kind of accolades, particularly in the academic realm, there are other things that should be valued as well, particularly lived experience. Today, all of our programs are community-led and co-created end-to-end. So starting from the process of understanding what the problem is, to defining a solution, to even understanding how do we measure success. And by the way, if they tell us something needs to be thrown out, we throw it out. It's not about ego. We are in service. And as designers, as learning designers, we are facilitators to the process of finding that solution. So we handed over the power of design. So remember this slide. I want to share with you an insight that came. This is the first insight of that co-design process. We learned that we were missing 2 critical factors to student engagement. The first being student attitudes. So this can include things like peer influence. Who do they actually hang out with and listen to, right? Self-efficacy was for us really the key factor that we then built our programs around. But we saw that most youth do not have the belief that they are change makers. And Hans, this takes me back to what your students say to you about lacking creativity or not being creative. So if we want them to be design thinkers, if we want them to be change makers, and we expect them to simply pick up a process and implement it, I guarantee you they will not get very far. You will have some sort of output because students know that they have to hand in homework. But to get genuine engagement and passion in the way that they design, you need that self-awareness and self-belief. And of course, adult advocacy. All the educators in the room know that the student doesn't succeed on their own. So more and more, we started working not just with educators, but with the caregivers and the parents in their midst. We started setting up partnerships. This was really a critical component of the way we moved forward. So let's talk about change making, because I've been talking about a bunch of other things. The UpstartED Changemaker in 2016, we said that they are digitally enabled and socially entrepreneurial, right? The 2 pillars. When we engaged in co-design, we realized that once again, we had gotten it wrong. That was a theme for a little while. And we worked with our communities, with our elders, with our students, with the parents, caregivers, youth, and community organizations to come up with the following. At UpstartED, a change maker is someone who identifies a challenge in their own life, home, school, community, or society, and who takes action in a responsible and sustainable way. As you can see, I am not mentioning technology, social entrepreneurship, or design thinking. What this definition challenged me to do as an educator first and foremost is to expand my horizons when I think about change making and not immediately label it as one type of framework or one type of approach. In fact, change making can come through many different shapes or forms, and civic engagement, civics and social entrepreneurship technology, they're vehicles for change making, but they do not define what change making is. Another big insight from our work has been our Changemaker framework. This framework really encapsulates what I have been sharing with you so far. So prior to the pandemic, we wanted our students to affect change, positive change on the big things, the big challenges facing our society, the big challenges facing our communities, and they still are. But fundamentally, that change needs to start from within at an individual level and then build out towards society through that intermediary point of having the family and the community. And fundamentally, we identified 3 core constructs that have been proven through peer-reviewed articles and through our own research to lead to very powerful educational outcomes, employment rates, mental health outcomes, and just lifelong success. And those are identity, belonging, and agency. How do we build identity, belonging, and agency? We do so through the design process. So that's still at the heart of our work. All of our programs engage youth in a process of understanding the problem they're trying to solve, taking action, and reflecting. And it's all circular. It's a bit of a loop. It's kind of everywhere. That's why the arrows are pointing like one towards the other. There's no rhyme or reason except for the fact that they are doing so first by understanding that they too are capable of positive change. This is just a quick sneak peek behind those mass constructs. What I will say is that the literature defines identity, belonging, and agency in very different ways, and it's a bit of a pet peeve of the SEL community, social emotional learning community, and during my graduate studies at Harvard University, it's something I had to really grapple with. How do I define identity? What are the skills that fall underneath? And agency and belonging. And of course, I turned to a lot of Western sources because of personal bias and the readiness of data. However, in speaking with our communities, we realized we had to come up with our own definitions and come up with the skills that made sense to our communities. So the other thing I really urge the audience is to say, do the research, look at the frameworks. However, contextualizing them locally and to the local culture is really critical because that's how you will get the best possible solutions. And I'll come back to this in just a moment. So what did this allow us to do? Finally, we had a new program called Youth Explore. This program today spans 4 different provinces in Canada. It operates coast to coast. We are located in Quebec, or QC, and we brought the program all the way to Northwest, where you see YT, that stands for Yukon, the Yukon territory. How many folks in here have traveled to Canada? Just a quick, okay, awesome. How many of you folks have traveled to British Columbia, the province? Wonderful. What about the Yukon? No, but the folks in British Columbia got close. Now, let me show you something. Actually, before I get there, one sole educator in the Yukon contacted us saying, we want to use your programs. What do you think we said? Yes, please. We need to test. And you know what? Turns out we needed to change our Changemaker framework. Yes, that didn't land as a joke, as I thought it did. I'm looking at my colleague who said I should go for it. But fascinatingly enough, the framework that we built with our community in the co-design process on the East Coast of the same country, Canada, was completely irrelevant on the other side of the country. Now, in fact, self-knowledge, self-regulation, self-esteem are what we call individuated aspects of identity. Whereas where the program was running in that context, we were missing some critical skills. So what did we do? Well, we had to. We had to trek across the country. We didn't walk though, we flew. And for those of you who have not had the privilege of traveling to Canada's north, it is beautiful. So these are photos my colleagues and I took. So you can see on the left is a bear. It's kind of cool. So we were driving along, and then there's bears, and you see moose, eagles, just on the side of the street. It's exciting, but also scary at the same time. But just to give you an idea of just how remote these communities are compared to the urban centers that we are used to serving in Montreal or in a place like Singapore. Just let this really sink in. And the image on the right is one of the towns where where our program is currently running. Very different lived reality. And we had the opportunity to work with folks all across that province in 5 different towns. And this is what came out of it, folks. We were missing 2 core pillars: cultural awareness and ancestral awareness. There was no way for us to know that we were missing these things had we not engaged in that co-design process and really gone there to listen. This is just to show that even our own framework is under development, and it will keep being under development for nonstop, really. But what is reassuring, I wanted to show you actually some statistics, right? Because the data does speak. We ran a pilot last year for about 250 students. 75% of those students are now coming from at-risk populations. Over 50% are leveraging our programs in remote communities as well as urban centers. Over 60% are Indigenous youth, and almost 40% have differentiated learning needs. So I can say, standing here today in front of you with pride, that yes, we are serving the people we wanted to serve. And in fact, these programs are more impactful than ever, thanks to that co-design process and a robust framework. So having that framework allows us to measure success, whether it's the Youth Explore program or the Seasons of You mental health journal that we launched just a month ago. We are seeing these success metrics repeated with high levels of identity, belonging, and agency attainment. So I will say one last thing, because prior to coming to the conference, a week ago actually, my colleague said, you know, Deanna, we're no longer happy with this because we got feedback and we were gonna break it and pull it apart. And I said to them, but no, I need to go talk about this. But as our colleagues here on stage have said, you have to break things. And you have to recognize when they are outdated. This framework that you see is only 12 months old. Only 12 months old, but the fact that it requires change speaks to this ever-evolving nature of our society, and the pace will only increase because of technology and other factors that we've discussed here today. So I guess I'll also be saying bye-bye to this particular framework. Soon. Not now, but soon. So I'm going to maybe leave you with these 3 questions as takeaways from this story that I've been telling you. The first is to ask you what a whole child approach looks like to you. If you were to go on Google and do the research, you're going to find different frameworks, different definitions. What does it look like to you individually? What does it look like to you inside your classroom with your students, inside your school, inside your community? It's really worth taking the time developing that complete image of this whole child approach in a way that's locally relevant and culturally appropriate. The second is, what concepts does your Changemaker framework need to include? I mentioned we have identity, belonging, and agency. Again, backed by evidence, but I'm not standing here in front of you saying that we have the answers, because we don't, because we're designers, and we can admit that everything is a prototype. And finally, how can you embrace community-led co-design in your own school or organization? And Ms. Lee, thank you for giving us such a beautiful example of one of the instances of co-design here, because I heard earlier in the audience that there is curiosity as to how do we do this in schools in Singapore, and we already have someone doing it here today. We all know that the change makers of tomorrow are in our classrooms today, and they are ready to take action. So let's empower them and let's become change makers ourselves. I look forward to seeing you in the workshop hopefully, for you all to build your own Changemaker programs. And I look forward to staying in touch. Thank you for your time.